On today's video, how far of a shot should we be taking on deer with our crossbows? Hey there, outdoor YouTubers. It's Dave Knetter from Knetter's Practical Outdoors. And like I said earlier, how far of a shot should we be taking with our crossbows on a deer? Okay, it's kind of an interesting question. Now, most hunters would agree that accuracy is probably the most important factor when you're trying to decide how far of a shot you might take on a deer with a crossbow. Well, whatever that distance is that you decide to shoot at a deer, you need to be very accurate shooting at that distance. Now, modern crossbows can be very accurate, okay? Shooting nice tight groups at 50, 60, even 70 yards is not that difficult to achieve with the modern crossbow. But just because we can shoot accurately at 70 yards, does that mean that we should be taking shots at deer at 70 yards? Well, maybe not. Those of you that are familiar with bow hunting for deer have probably heard the term jumping the string. Oftentimes when a deer is startled or spooked, their first reaction is to crouch down and then spring up and run. So sometimes when they hear that twang of your bow going off, a crossbow or a vertical bow, their instinct tells them crouch down, spring up, and run off. So if the deer crouches down when it hears the twang of your crossbow going off, it can move downward quite a bit before that bolt or arrow reaches it. And of course this can cause a poor shot on the deer, this can cause an entire miss of the deer, and we really do not want either one of those scenarios to happen, right guys? Now I know some of you guys are saying, hey, these modern crossbows are very fast. They're so fast, it doesn't give the deer time to twitch or flinch or jump the string. Well, some crossbows are very fast. But let's think about that a little bit. Let's say you're shooting a crossbow that shoots 300 feet per second. Now, I know a lot of crossbows are shooting over 400 feet per second, but a lot of crossbows don't shoot that fast, okay? This particular crossbow, this one shoots 315 feet per second. But let's just say 300 for the sake of argument. You're shooting a crossbow at 300 feet per second. So you're shooting a crossbow that's 100 yards per second. So if you're shooting at a deer at say 50 yards, you're giving that deer 1/2 second to twitch, crouch, flinch, essentially jump the string before that arrow or bolt gets to him. 1/2 of a second, that's a pretty long time. Okay guys, this is what a 50-yard shot looks like. Okay, this is an actual 50-yard shot. I measured it out. And watch how much time it takes between when the crossbow fires and the balloon on the target pops. Then think about what if you were shooting at 70 yards. Now that deer even has more time to jump the string. Now, I know some of you guys are saying, well, I'm not shooting at 300 feet per second. I'm shooting at 400 feet per second, so that deer's not going to have nearly that much time. Now, certainly 400 feet per second is faster than 300 feet per second. Okay, but remember that feet per second is the actual muzzle velocity. Okay, if you're shooting 400 feet per second, that means your bolt is going 400 feet per second as soon as it comes out of the crossbow. All right. The further and further away this bolt gets from the crossbow, right, the longer the shot you're taking, the slower and slower this bolt starts to travel, okay? So that 400 feet per second, that's only initially as soon as it comes out of the crossbow, and from then on, it's starting to get slower and slower and slower, right? That 400 feet per second is not through the entirety of the shot, especially if you're shooting 50, 60, 70 yards out. So what am I saying, guys? Am I saying that we should never be taking shots at deer if they're over 30 yards away? No, absolutely not. I know several very responsible hunters that routinely shoot deer with their crossbows, with their vertical bows too, at 40, 50 yards. How far away that you may attempt to take a deer with a crossbow, that kind of decision really needs to be left up to the individual hunters themselves. But if you are going to take longer shots, keep these things in mind, okay? Speed, distance, time, right? That time between when you're pulling the trigger and when that bolt impacts the deer. You know, how much time is there? Keep all these things in mind. Another thing that kind of helps to prevent deer from jumping the string is to quiet your crossbow down. If you're going to be taking some of these longer shots, I think it's a real good idea to try to get your crossbow as quiet as you can. Add some silencers wherever you can and get that crossbow quieter. And you know, the less noise it makes when you go to shoot that deer, the less likely that deer is going to be to flinch or crouch or jump the string. Another thing to keep in mind is the disposition of the deer that you're attempting to shoot at. All right? Now, maybe this deer is just kind of meandering slow through the woods without a care in the world. Okay? Maybe it's a buck and it's really focused on this doe that it's behind. It's following this doe through the woods. Okay? A deer that has that kind of a disposition is much less likely to jump the string than, say, a deer on the other end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum would be, you see a deer, maybe it's 50 yards out, and you're like, okay, yeah, that's a deer I'd like to take. I'm gonna take a shot on that one. And you raise your crossbow up, and out of the corner of the deer's eye, it catches a little bit of movement. And it cranks its head up, and it's looking directly at you, and it just freezes right there. And it's just looking directly at you, because like I say, it kind of busted you. It kind of caught that movement. A deer that's in that disposition is very likely to jump the string, flinch, crouch and run as soon as it hears the bow go off. So, I mean, these are just things to keep in mind. I'm not telling you don't take that shot. I'm not telling you you should take that shot. Again, like I said, that's really up to the individual hunter. But I do think these are things to keep in mind, especially when you're taking a little bit longer shots. You know, when you're getting up to 35, 40, 50, 60, even 70-yard shots. I think the disposition of the deer really can come into play. Now, anytime any of us are trying to decide whether to shoot a deer or not with our crossbow, that is a personal decision. That decision needs to be left up to the individual hunter themselves. But if you're going to be taking a little bit longer shots with your crossbow, it's not just about accuracy. Accuracy is the most important factor, all right? If you're going to shoot at a deer that's 50 yards away, you need to be accurate at 50 yards away. But it's also about speed and time, right? That time factor between trigger pull and impact into the deer, all right? And it's also about deer disposition. Is that deer on high alert, or is that deer acting really casual? So factor all these things in when you're trying to decide whether to take a shot or not, okay? And I think it'll help you make better decisions out in the field, right? Because nobody wants to lose a deer, right, guys? Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to wound a deer and not recover it. That's just no good at all. We want to stay away from that as much as possible, all right? And another thing, guys, remember to hunt, fish, laugh, repeat. This is Dave Knetter from Knetter's Practical Outdoors. Hey, thanks for watching and God bless.